So, before anybody asks, yes, this is me. Doing the thing that we've been doing for years and years and years, making something out of nothing. Because today what I wanted to do was go over Patrik Allvin'S trade history with the Vancouver Canucks from last year up until now. And in particular, I wanted to do some sort of a 1 year later look at the Canucks and their trades, because you might be thinking, okay, well, a year later, what's there a year's worth of an anniversary to look at here? What trade are we talking about? Well, I wanted to talk about just the idea of trades itself, because it's been very apparent that for the Vancouver Canucks, what is essentially seen as one of the more aggressive front offices out there, what is seen as one of the more ambitious trading parties out there, has not actually gone out there and done any trades to start out the 24-25 season. If you wanted to say that the Vasily Podkolzin trade back in August counts, then okay, you can say that trade maybe counts, Ilya Mikheyev, Sam Lafferty to Chicago maybe counts, but ultimately, the reason we are talking about 1 year later is because it's been about a year and a bit since the Vancouver Canucks made some pretty significant trades, all within the span of about 2 months. The reason we're making this video is to illustrate how aggressive Vancouver was at making trades last season compared to this year. Because from September 2023 to the end of November 2023, the Vancouver Canucks actually made themselves 5 trades. Take a look at this. On September 19th, the Vancouver Canucks acquired Casey DeSmith for Tanner Pearson and a third from Montreal. On October 8th, they acquired Sam Lafferty from Toronto for a 5th-round pick. On October 17th, so 9 days later, the Canucks then acquired Mark Friedman and Ty Glover in exchange for Jack Rathbone and Kirill Plasek. In November of 2023, so a month later, the Canucks then traded away Anthony Beauvillier, and then 2 days after that, they traded with the Calgary Flames to acquire Nikita Zadorov. Patrik Allvin and Jim Rutherford were extremely aggressive in this time frame, and when you consider the assets that were getting moved around, the guys that were sent away, the guys that were acquired, you can tell that Vancouver had a really strong vision for what they were doing with these moves. Now, before we dive into those moves in particular, I wanted to talk about just now, Vancouver hasn't made a trade since August 18th, and I feel like a lot of people are thinking about the Canucks as one of these teams that is more poised to making some sort of a trade. Like, oh, they need defense, they've got these guys, they've got Höglander, he could get moved soon. Who knows, maybe by the time this video is published on YouTube, maybe Höglander's already gone. It's very possible. But Vancouver has held off from making these trades. Part of that, I feel, is because the market is a little bit different now compared to what it was last year. I think a lot of teams are looking for second-line centers, a lot of teams are looking for right-handed D, and Vancouver is looking for that defenseman to help him out with the absence of Filip Hronek. And Vancouver, of course, is not the only team looking for a D-man. You've got teams like Edmonton, for example, also being in the market for those kinds of players. So it might be a little bit more difficult for Vancouver to fully break out of this stranglehold that is the National Hockey League trade market at the moment, unless, of course, they were to package a guy like Nils Höglander with maybe a prospect or something to getting a significant right-handed defenseman piece. However, if we take a look at some of the trades made last year, I wanted to dive into some of these names here because the first one, the Vancouver Canucks acquired Casey DeSmith from Montreal for Tanner Pearson and a third. I think a lot of people would say that trade was a very good one for the Canucks. Casey DeSmith, for all intents and purposes, was a serviceable backup for Vancouver. He was okay in the playoffs. I say very okay because it's not like Artur Shilovs came out there and stole the show, right? Oh wait, that's exactly what he did. Never mind. But Casey DeSmith, while he wasn't perfect, he was all right. And Tanner Pearson going over to Montreal really was nothing. Now Tanner Pearson's in Vegas and he's actually doing pretty well. Nice to see Tanner revive his career in the ways that he has with the Golden Knights. But the Canucks traded away a third-round pick to get rid of Tanner Pearson's contract and get on Casey DeSmith in the process. Pretty okay trade, not really the most significant, but of course, getting a backup goalie is always intriguing. The next trade the Vancouver Canucks made in the 23-24 season, Sam Lafferty to Toronto, from Toronto for a 5th-round pick. And it's kind of funny because a lot of people would say that Sam Lafferty did have himself a great start with Vancouver in 2023-2024. And that, I think, is the biggest assessment as to what we can remember from him and his profile. He had 24 points in 79 games with the Canucks last season, which was great. But most of those points came at the beginning of the year. The guy dried up offensively in the second half of the season. It was a night and day difference. And playing with a guy like Elias Pettersson to kick things off, he actually was pretty okay, all things considered. It's just that didn't carry on for the remainder of the season. After December, this guy totally stunk, and he was stuck with Elias Pettersson on the wing. He didn't do anything after that. He lost his offensive touch. He couldn't drive to the net anymore. And Lafferty ultimately, I think, was one of these guys that heavily contributed to Elias Pettersson's statistical downfall in the second half of 2023-2024. Sure, the Canucks traded away a 5th-round pick, so it's not really all too substantial there, but still, this trade was a pretty meh one for Vancouver when you consider what Lafferty was for the team into the playoffs. The third trade the Canucks made at the start of the 23-24 season was Mark Friedman and Ty Glover in exchange for Jack Rathbone and Karel Plasek. Now, let's disregard Karel Plasek because he really is a prospect that I don't think is worth talking about. Ty Glover is a forward in the Abbotsford Canucks system right now. He's doing okay, but realistically, he's not really going to amount to much anyway either. So Mark Friedman for Jack Rathbone essentially is the big deal here. Rathbone is interesting because a lot of people, myself included, thought he could have been, let's say, a number 5, number 6 power play capable defenseman heading into the long-term future, but even right now, if you look at Jack Rathbone, he's in the AHL with the Rochester Americans, the Buffalo system, and he's only got 8 points in 21 games. He used to be one of the top defensemen and rookie defensemen in the AHL, but for some reason, things have really taken a turn for the worst. Meanwhile, Mark Friedman, while he's not necessarily any sort of a world beater, he's still a serviceable guy who can play NHL minutes once in a while in a meaningful call-up role. He's with the team right now, so who knows if Mark Friedman actually finds himself into the Canucks lineup over the next few days. But when you disregard the Jack Rathbone age and potential, this really is a trade that the Canucks got out of with a dub. Because right now, Mark Friedman is a better player than Jack Rathbone is, and a lot of the potential we thought Rathbone had a few years ago, it's not really looking all too present now anymore. Then you go a month into the future and you look at the Anthony Beauvillier trade. The Vancouver Canucks traded Beauvillier to Chicago, they got a 5th-round pick in exchange, and they subsequently flipped a 5th-round pick with a 3rd for Nikita Zadorov a few days later. Now, trading away Beauvillier, fantastic move. Chef's kiss. Beauvillier is in Nashville, or not Nashville, excuse me, he was in Nashville. He's in Pittsburgh right now, and he did have himself a pretty good start off to the year. He's got 10 points in 27 games played with the Penguins right now, on pace for 30 on the season. But in Vancouver, Beauvillier was not good. He was really streaky. He wasn't really providing much offense like he had in the second half of the 22-23 season after the Bo Horvat trade. And ultimately, the Canucks needed to move on from him because his cap hit was at a pretty substantial $4.15 million a year. Trading that away to Chicago, they wanted to get some extra guys. They needed some guys to pay, and Vancouver got themselves a measly 5th-round pick in exchange. They didn't have to trade anything away to get Beauvillier off the team. Big dub right there. And then Nikita Zadorov flipping that same draft pick, the 5th plus a 3rd for Big Z. That was an amazing move that the Vancouver Canucks benefited from heavily in the Stanley Cup Playoffs the upcoming season. We all remember what Nikita Zadorov was for Vancouver in the 24 playoffs. He was a goal-scoring, physical beast. He was moving well. He was skating well. He was doing everything well. And he got paid in the offseason because of it. Maybe a little bit too much, maybe a little bit too long, but he still got paid, and he was priced out of Vancouver because of how well he had performed in that playoff run. Do the Vancouver Canucks regret not keeping Nikita Zadorov around? Maybe they do at this point. It's possible, especially when you consider what the D-core looks like nowadays. But Nikita Zadorov getting traded to Vancouver was a great move for the team. Ultimately, it cost them a 5th and a 3rd. That's not really all too bad. But the point of this video was to just dive into some of these trades and fully acknowledge where the Vancouver Canucks were a year ago compared to right now. Things are a lot tighter now. They won a lot more games last year to start off the year. a whole bunch of guys were scoring more points too. So things are looking different here, and I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comments. How does that make you feel when you compare last year's team to this year's team? I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.